On a sunny afternoon in August of 2014, a 24-year-old tourist, who we're going to call Angela Lyons, drove a rented moped through a busy street in Vietnam. Angela had come here about a week earlier from Scotland, where she lived, and so far the trip had been great. And now she was just cruising slowly on her moped, and she turned her head, and then she felt her moped hit something really hard, and she actually fell off her bike. She hit her head pretty hard, but luckily she was wearing a helmet, and she looked and saw what she had run into, and it was actually another moped. And fortunately, the crash was kind of low speed, and so the other moped driver clearly was physically okay as well. Their mopeds were not actually damaged at all. And so after she said she was sorry, the other moped driver hopped back on their moped and drove off. And Angela, she felt a little bump on her head. Other than that, she seemed fine. About a week later, Angela was back home in Glasgow, Scotland, and she was inside of her doctor's office about to be examined. Following that moped accident, Angela had stayed in Vietnam for a few more days. And the whole time she had checked that bump on her head and it had gone away pretty quickly. However, when she landed back home in Scotland, she began developing extreme nosebleeds. Angela's doctor came into the room. He would tell Angela that he did not think her nosebleeds had anything to do with the moped accident. Much more realistically, the nosebleeds were from her body adjusting to the weather in Scotland. Vietnam, it was a very hot environment, and Scotland was very cold, and so that shift was likely causing these nosebleeds. And so the doctor recommended that Angela put some Vaseline inside of her nostrils to keep it moist, and just wait for this to clear up as her body transitioned back to Scotland. A few days later, despite following the doctor's orders, her nosebleeds had persisted. If anything, they were getting worse. Angela simply turned on her shower and waited for the water to warm up, and then she hopped inside. Angela began just kind of touching her nose. She began to feel something weird sort of deep inside of her nostril that she maybe hadn't noticed before. She actually pushed pretty hard on whatever this was inside of her nasal cavity. It sent this blinding wave of pain over her, and then simultaneously, blood began pouring out of her nose, and she couldn't get it to stop. And so in a panic, she jumps out of the shower, towels off, gets dressed, and rushes to the nearest hospital. When Angela got to the emergency room, a nurse quickly brought her into an exam room, and after a while, Angela starts to realize that this exam is taking a really long time. It would turn out Angela's primary care doctor had been right when he said he didn't think her nosebleeds had anything to do with that moped accident. However, her nosebleeds were connected to something else she had done while in Vietnam. Because in Vietnam, in between going out to nightclubs and partying and trying all that great food, Angela was also swimming in these local rivers. And at one point, when she was in one of those rivers, something found its way into her nose, a 3-inch long blood-sucking leech. It had been living deep inside of Angela's nostril and sinus cavity for over a week, separated from her brain only by this extremely fragile bone that's only about a ½ millimeter thick. Hospital doctors would spend about 30 minutes painstakingly pulling this leech out of Angela's nose, and then once it was out, she would go on to make a full recovery.